Okay. Hello, and welcome to The Way It Is. I'm your host, Barnard Sims. I thank you so much for tuning in with us this evening. Tonight, we have a special guest. One thing I learned from introducing people, I had an event one time where the Tuskegee Airmen was there, and I had read all about him. And so what I read about him was that he had joined the Tuskegee Airmen to this 90-some-year-old man. And I read that when he was a young guy, he had joined the Tuskegee Airmen so he could get the leather jacket, so he could attract all the girls. And so after I read all this information on him, I went up to him and I told him that, and he looked at me strange. 90-some-year-old man said, "I joined to get a jacket." He said, "Man, don't never believe everything you read." So what I learned from that is when I'm introducing people, of course, I've read up on, I guess I actually was on a panel with him once, and he's the author of this, A Marginalized Voice. And so what I learned from that is to allow the guests to introduce themselves so I don't mess it up. So hello, brother Reginald Williams. How you doing today?
Mr. Sims, how are you? I'm well. I have no complaints whatsoever. You know, that's an interesting story. I actually hate bios. I say that because whatever's on my bio is really irrelevant because it's what I already did. And what we really need to talk about is what I'm doing moving forward. But long story short, man, I was born in New York, raised in North Carolina. I'm a country boy by heart, man. Grew up wanting to be an NBA basketball player. Had a pretty vicious basketball game, scholarship to college to play ball. But what happened is during that time is my grandfather, who had this amazing influence on me, he was a man of the community. And just watching the things that he did in the community infected me in such a way that became my life. And so spent a few years as in the music business, running a production company. Left that, went into journalism for a little while, but for the last 20 years, I've been in behavioral health, primarily working with men of color, men and boys of color. And so that's my story. That's my resume, man. That's my bio.
All right, well, let's go back to, you say your beginnings were from the South in North Carolina?
Yes, sir.
What part of North Carolina?
I'm from a little town called Chadron, North Carolina, which is 30 miles south of Lumberton, North Carolina. I'm kind of like in the middle of, I always say if you put up a triangle and put Chadron in the middle of it, at the top of the triangle will be Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. At this end of the triangle will be Wilmington, and at this end of the triangle will be Fayetteville. So I'm kind of like in the middle of all three of those spaces.
Wow. It's not about me, but it's about you. But I'm actually supposed to go to what is the book festival in Charlotte like this weekend, where they have this like campaign where they're trying to support independent bookstores.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna visit that area, but it's more like around Charlotte.
Yeah, if you went, you're gonna be on somewhere in Charlotte, or there's a possibility in Charlotte you can be on Highway 74. And so if you took Highway 74 from Charlotte straight down, you would end up being in the city that I grew up in, probably about a 2-hour drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then what was it like growing up and I guess I can say you from the dirty South. I thought you was a northerner, but I guess you took some of those things and what we call those little things where we used to make those little shoot at each other with the little strings of grass thing. You probably did that growing up.
It did everything growing up, man. It was the greatest experience of my life because I just learned so much. It was it was a community, right? And I always tell the story. I never knew when I was there that I was poor, right? That we were poor. Materially we were poor, right? But what I would find out is after I left, I began to see other things that other people have. Like, wow, we didn't have that, and we didn't have that. But what we had was we had a community of people, and we had a community of love, and it's a love that still exists to this day. So, my friends, the people who I call my friends are the people who I grew up with. I got friends for 50 years. And so, Chadron, North Carolina, and everything that it instilled in me is who I am, it's what I stand on. I would go to New York in the summertime, and I would play basketball and things like that. I kind of did the reverse. people from up north would come south, but I was up south and I would go up north, right? So, but I loved everything about where I grew up, everything about it. Wouldn't trade it for the world.
Right, right. And going back to when I met you, I don't know if you remember or not, we was in a seminar for a Black Writers Workspace. And I
Right.
was sitting there and I was looking at your setup and the lecturer was praising you on having your book and your background and all this stuff, the microphone and all this stuff set up. And I'm sitting up there still mangling over what my title was. But I learned so much from listening to you. And I have to say this to you personally. You reached out to me and said, hey, man, I'm very interested in your book. And sometimes as a first-time author, that's all you need is that little light, that little encouragement. It made me change like the title of my book, but it did, it kind of like made me focus it more on the specific audience I was speaking to. So I just wanted to thank you for giving me that encouragement when I needed, and this presentation package you bring when you enlighten other authors.
Thank you. I believe it's critical that we as authors, we as Black authors, man, that we support one another. And, again, men is my population. I have nothing against women, but it's very important for me, man, that Black men be writers and tell stories. Because again, the world is trying to suppress our voice. So it's when I find a brother who's trying to write something, anything that I can do, anything that I can give, anything that I can lend, I'm trying to do it. So congratulations, man. Beautiful book. And I see you making big moves, man. I see you making big moves.
Well, no, it ain't about me, man. It's about trying to connect with people like you who help inspire voiceless people in the South. Sometimes as a Southern writer, we don't embrace that. You think you have to be part of the big market, but I have to write stories from where I am, and
absolutely.
And you reached out to me and validated that in me,
absolutely,
without even knowing it. And so here we are now, and I'm talking to you about your work and some of the things you do. But going from growing up in the South, what are some of the things that kind of defined your character that made you the man you are today?
Again, it was growing up and seeing, we didn't have, even to this day, we didn't have community centers and we didn't have programs that we can participate in. So everything that we saw was just what happened in the community. And, I saw, just the elders, the men of the community, man, and how cohesive they were in terms, or at least that's the way it looked to me as a kid growing up. And so, as a man, like I said, my grandfather, man, was just, I always say this, my grandfather was the greatest therapist that I ever known. We're talking about a man with a sixth grade education, but it was other men, Mr. Brown, it was Reverend Towns. These men, they were just so impactful. And the women as well, man, start with my grandmother. My grandmother to me was an angel, was an angel walking on earth. And so when I think about where I come from, I don't think about anything but those individuals, those people. And I try to carry, the way that I live, I try to carry them with me. And I always say this, I'm trying to be half the man that my grandfather was. You look at me, I'm an educated man. And as I said, my grandfather only had sixth grade education. I earn a whole lot more money than my grandfather ever did. I've done probably many more things that he's ever done. And if you took all of that and put it together, it ain't half of who he is. And I'm just trying to be half of that man.
Oh man, that's powerful. That's powerful. I always say education is a great thing, but the impact that your grandfather had on you is immeasurable. And
absolutely,
those are things, those lessons like that define a person's character. And in defining your character, you have a lot of things that you do in the community other than writing books, but we'll get into that. But tell us a little bit more about some of the things you're doing in the community where you live now.
I live in Bowie, Maryland. Bowie, Maryland is right outside of Washington, D.C. Probably, no traffic, 10 minutes. For the football fans, I actually live right down the street from FedEx Field, where the Washington Commanders. And yeah, Commanders play. So that's the area that I'm in right now. And so what I've been here almost 20 years, or in the area almost 20 years now. And what I do is, again, when I first got here, I was actually in journalism. And I began to volunteer in this thing called behavioral health. Didn't know what it was, but somebody asked me to come in and have a conversation with some young men, and I got bit by the bug. But again, that's what my grandfather was really doing. And so, in that time, I began to create workshops for men who were in the justice system, what I call the injustice system. We would have these Monday workshops, and I wrote the curriculum for it. It was a 9-month workshop. And what we did, we would just talk about every part of a young man's life and how it impacted him. And what we were finding out was that oftentimes is that these young men just didn't, the things that we were telling them or sharing with them, right? Because really, I wasn't an expert in their lives or anything. It was just conversation, but it was a structured conversation. And we just began to have these dialogues, and they began to recognize things, and begin to recognize that they didn't have to sell drugs, that they didn't have to, carry guns. They didn't have to be angry. All these things that the society or their culture has told them that they would do. So I did that work. I've done gang violence work. I just had a book signing a week ago yesterday. And at the book signing, we had a company out of Texas, a company from Texas flew in to stream the book signing. And the gentleman who did the sound actually lives in my neighborhood, never seen it before. But anyway, he does audio engineering. And he's like, yo, I would really like to teach young men how to do this. So as of last Tuesday, so a week ago today, man, I've already put together the students, the place, and now we're creating the curriculum for him to teach audio engineering to young men, to give them something else to do. So I'm always just trying to find different types of concepts to put into the lives of these young men, man, so they be able to do, to fulfill their greatness, because they are great. There's a thing I always say to young men, is that you were born to be a masterpiece. Do not live your life as a carbon copy. And so oftentimes they're living their lives as carbon copy because this is what the world is telling them. And I'm trying to tell them that they're masterpieces and live it.
That's deep. That's deep. Another thing that caught my attention in your book is when you spoke about like working with the kid, not videotaping them, trying to say, hey, here's what I'm doing with these kids, and doing it because kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's right.
So could you elaborate on how your approach to building that bond and that relationship with our youth that most people just throw away?
Yeah. A lot of times, man, when we get people who come in and they speak before kids, or motivational speakers or inspirational speakers, the thing they want to do is they want to have someone taking pictures. They want to have a camera in front of the kids. And that's just not authentic, right? When you introduce a camera into the equation, it changes the whole dynamics of a room. So, a lot of times people say, well, can you give me pictures of what you know? I can't give you pictures because there's nobody taking pictures of me, because I want to have an intimate, private conversation with these kids. I don't want these kids to think that I'm using them as fodder to build my resume. So what happens is you can't come into my class with no camera. You can't come into my class with no still camera, no video camera, nothing of that nature. Because the one thing that I want to do is, first of all, I come there to be taught, right? I'm not this guru who's going to stand in front of you and teach you all these wonderful things. There's some experience that I have, and I can guide you along the process. But in order for me to guide you along the process, I have to first be educated by you to figure out what barriers are in your way and figure out how we can remove them. So my thing is, I love these kids. I love the grown men that I work with. And it's not about me. It's not about me. It really isn't. It's about how I can impact them. And so I don't do a whole lot of I don't do a whole lot of camera stuff. I'm not having people in there taking pictures and things of that nature. And when people ask me, no, you can't.
Right.
You can't do it.
And that's an interesting approach, because like I was just saying, it's a well, I'm not trying to give all your book away now, but you made a great example of how doctors they don't come in a room and start working on people and say, hey, turn the camera on or something. You made a few examples like that. Could you expand on that a little bit for me?
Yeah, it's like it's almost like, you know, if you were going to your doctor to have an exam, right? And the doctor's telling you you need to disrobe or whatever so that he or she can examine you. You don't want cameras peering over you, you know, peering over the doctor as he's examining you.
Right.
That's the same concept, you know. It's like, you know, in order for them to get naked, right, they have to feel comfortable. They have to feel like there's a safe space. They have to feel like there's not anyone, you know, what's the thing, peeping Tom, you know. So, right. You know, I just thought about that example. You know, when you go into a doctor's office, the doctor he keeps it private. And like I say, if he's telling you to disrobe, he doesn't have cameras peering over this robe. And I don't want to, you know, I don't want that for the kids. I want them to just be able to have an honest conversation. In addition to that, let's assume that a kid has something to say, like, you know, yeah, I robbed that kid, or yeah, I did this, or yeah, I did that. And now I have that on camera.
Right.
What kind of, you know, so now if the camera's not there, he can tell, he can really say what he feels. But again, when you begin to add different dynamics into a classroom setting, it changes. Even if I bring a female facilitator into the room, the dynamics of that class is going to change a little bit, right? Because the young men might start posturing for the young women, you know. So, you know, you have to understand your audience, and you have to understand that everything that you're introducing to your audience, how it might potentially affect them.
Right. And as boys, and you from the South, I'm pretty sure you went through this too. As young men, as boys growing up, becoming young men, we kind of weren't encouraged to have a space to express ourselves. If
Absolutely.
we start crying, shut up before I give you something to cry about. Stop acting like a this, or stop acting like a that, and something degrading us for really having real raw emotions. And so I appreciate that you are allowing boys the space to be able to, at a safe place, to be able to have dialogue and to be as therapeutic as you are in your approach and engaging our young men.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Something else. It was something else I wanted to ask you, going back to when I met you at the seminar at Black Writers Workspace, is like you was, you know, we getting into some author stuff now, but something you was like, see, I bought your book while we was on the live.
Sure did.
And you were kind of like against Amazon. Now we couldn't go into that then, but now on the way it is, I wanted to know so bad why you, like, as far as in your publishing journey, you like more like the way you are and selling them yourself instead of going through Amazon.
No disrespect to Amazon, no disrespect to Jeff Bezos. If you're looking in terms of a business model, he's you know, we all want to create a business model that you build one time and it becomes sustainable and you just can earn money off of it. But it's really a virtual plantation. And we as authors are participating in the virtual plantation. Jeff Bezos, how his business model is built is to get customer data, right? So here we go. Barnard writes, he decides he wants to sit down and he wants to write this book, The Southern Awakening, right? And so he puts all his energy and effort into writing this book, and he makes all the investments to make sure that this book is a very good book. Then he goes and he puts this book on Amazon, right? And so now Barnard is busting his butt to get people to buy his book. You know, buy my book. And in business, there's a thing called cost of acquisition. How much does it cost for you to get that customer to buy your book? So the cost of acquisition could be time, it could be money. So in other words, let's say, for instance, you purchase ads, right? And it drove somebody to buy your book, but then they went to Amazon to buy it. right? Now you made the sale.
Right.
The customer belongs to Amazon. Customer belongs to Amazon because Amazon has all the data, right? Because when they go in there to buy your book, they're putting their name and their address and their telephone number and their credit card information so that Amazon can take the book and send it to that customer. Right? And so that's not your customer. That's Amazon's customer. Now, Amazon has that data information and they're going to keep promoting to that customer to keep them buying other things, right? And so when somebody decides, I really like that book and I'm going to buy 20 copies of that book, somebody bought 20 copies of your book and you can't even tell them thank you because you don't know who they are.
True.
Right? You don't know who they are. And then when you follow up with your second book, who do you follow up to? You don't follow up to anybody because you don't have the customer information, right? So Amazon is using you to get that customer information. In addition to that, when someone purchases your book, it's going to take you anywhere from 60 to 90 days to get your money. So in other words, today is April 21st, right? So no, the day is April 19th. So you wouldn't get paid for the rest of April, which is 12 days or 10 days or whatever, 11 days, right? So that's 11 days right there, and then 2 months. So it would take you 71 days before you got your money, right? And so I don't want to wait 71 days to get my money. I want my money now, right? Also, we have to take Amazon's word that 20 people bought your book. I know that. I'm not saying that they're cheating us. I'm just saying, how do I know that 20 people bought my book? Maybe 25 people bought it, right? So my thing is we have to begin to build platforms that where we can control every part of the narrative. And so for me, I want, the one issue with me doing it the way that I do it is that I'm responsible for getting the product out. And that's not cool, especially on the days when I get a lot of books. Oh God, I got to do this work, right? But that's the price that I have to pay for having control of everything. And at some point in time, I'll have a system where someone else will do that for me, but I'll still have the critical information. And so Amazon is a virtual platform and we participate in. There's so many other things I can tell you about Amazon, Bernard, to the point where how they'll use you. They'll take your book and tell somebody, I'll give you Southern Awakening free of charge. Now they'll pay you whatever they say they'll pay you. You're still going to get your royalty payment for it, right? But they'll say, I'll give you Southern Awakening free of charge. But what you have to do is you have to sign up for some particular package that costs $14.95 a month. Now you can try this package out, and if you don't like it, you can cancel. They already know by the algorithm the amount of people who will not cancel. So there's so many things that Amazon does. And again, from a business model, it's a great business model. But for me as an author, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. Just as I don't believe in the concept of, you have a lot of people say, I want to get my book in different bookstores. And I get it. I saw you in Barnes and Nobles, right? Yeah. I want to be in Barnes and Nobles. I want to be in Books A Million. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But for me, I'm not really, me having my book in Barnes and Noble in California does what? What does it really do for me, right? So the bookstores that I have, the stores that I have my books in are stores I have somewhat of a relationship with. I can come in there, have a book signed, I can come in there and do a workshop, and that'll bring people to my book. But for me to just arbitrarily have my books all over Barnes and Nobles, more than anything, they'll probably sit on the shelves because I don't have any marketing material going to those stores to let them know that my book is in the store.
And it's oh man, I needed to hear that because again, everything, I'm getting a lot of information and everything is new to me. I kind of didn't have a choice because my publisher wasn't getting my stuff out fast enough. And next, I looked on Amazon, my book was for sale and I didn't even know it. So it's like you saying some deep stuff that I'm like, wow, I should have called you on your phone after they didn't let you elaborate on why you had an issue with Amazon. It's very competitive too. Our books don't get placement in those places you're talking about.
That's
and
right.
That's why it's important I'm finding out now from listening to you and others, it's important to have a relationship with like some of these independent bookstores. Are you familiar with Mahogany Books? Is that in your area?
We won't have a conversation about them.
Oh, okay.
But no, they are in my area. They're actually they're probably 12 minutes from me.
Wow. Okay.
So I'll just say this: in order to get into Mahogany Bookstore, you have to be distributed by Lulagram. I mean by
Ingram Sparks.
Ingram Spark on Lulagram. So I'm not distributed by them, so I can't be in their bookstore. But I'll just leave it at that.
And the whole thing about these bookstores is that they're supposed to be able to have supposed to be promote local authors and that nature. So that's So I was looking into those places. But DC, you're around the DC area. Is that like a big haven for authors of black literature?
When you look at DC, and I'm in Baltimore is north of me, which is probably about 40 minutes north of me, there's a huge artistic market in these areas in terms of authors, in terms of entertainers, music, in terms of poetry. So it is a very vibrant market in the DC area. Absolutely. We have one store or a series of stores called Busboys and Poet. The gentleman who created these stores, I want to say he's from Greece. But anyway, he created these stores as a place where artists and activists can come and do their thing. So it's a really nice restaurant, serves a very diverse menu, vegan and things, vegetarian and things of that nature. But it also each store has a bookstore in there, and each store has a stage where you have poetry. And so like today, what's today? Today's Tuesday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, they have poetry in there. So you get poetry, you get the bookstore, and you get someplace to eat. And that's I have my books in one of those stores, So I think it's 7 locations throughout the DC area, and then there's one location in Baltimore.
Is that connected with your initiative, like Renaissance of Raising Black Boys?
It's not connected to it, but the idea, that's kind of like a part of it. The Harlem Renaissance was the reason why I kind of even came up with that title.
Wow.
Use the Renaissance in there. But when you look at that particular store, it has that whole Renaissance feeling, because when you go in there, you'll see the way that they decor the walls is like, Langston Hughes and, Zara, Zara
Neil Hurston.
Yeah. So all those poets and authors, Richard Wright, you see them up on the walls, and it's a very cool vibe. It's a very cool vibe. And all the staff, the staff members are, they have that very artistic or that artsy type feel to it. So it's a really cool place. And it's like I say, you'll find your artists, you'll find your poets there, your writers there. And, I had a big event back in 2016, man. And I just went to different busboys and poets, man, and saw poets, man, and pulled them. Hey, I got this event going on. And we had this real big thing called Speak Art Life. And it was an event for young Black boys, but we used this whole entertainment and art as a way to attract people to it. And we had a beautiful time. And it was held at a church.
Wow.
Yeah. Held at a church. And the pastor was like, yo, because the pastor actually offered the space to me. I said, nah, man, I can't do that because I'm gonna have these poets in there and I don't know what these poets are gonna say. I don't want to be offensive. And bring these people here. And so, You know, he had a really big basement area where, you know, he can do it. And we just had a ball, man. We had an absolute ball. And actually, one of the artists that was at this place, a guy by the name of Gerald Gibbs, since that time, he has blown up and he's become, I don't want to say world renowned, but he is on his way to being a world renowned visual artist. Wow.
Yeah. And that's important. That's another way that as boys, like, again, growing up, we've taught to suppress our ambitions, you know, stay in this lane, don't do this. It's like sometimes I still find myself conditioned to, like, I give you a perfect example. When my kids were small and I had the diaper bag and I'm walking through Macy's and I'm going by clothing and I'm holding my hands up because I know that the people think that I'm stuffing stuff in the clothes. But how sad is that as a grown man, 50, you know, almost 50 years old at that time, I'm still conditioned to try to look innocent, even though I ain't doing nothing wrong. And that, to me, that's all the proof I need that to know that there are some systemic problems that we need to challenge in addressing those issues. That's why I applaud you in your work and trying to help our boys to navigate the treacherous waters of America.
You make such, it's actually, when I started this work, I specifically chose to work with adult men, right? Because everybody else was working with youth, and, you know, to be honest with you, I didn't know if I had the patience to work with youth, and right, so since everybody else is working with youth, let me work with grown men. And about a year and a half, maybe 2 years into working with adult men, I realized, Bernard, is that chronologically they were adults. Emotionally, they were still children, right? They were stuck in some place where they were conditioned. So we do live in a space where we may be successful in terms of our career. We may have the nice house and nice car and, you know, earning a good career. But when you began to strip all those things away or ask them to go to their dark moments are often someplace in their teen years where they got stuck and they haven't come from that time yet. Which reminds me, and I also have this in the book. I'm doing a radio program one time, and, you know, we did one whole segment, commercial breaks, go into the second segment, and somewhere in the second segment, they start to take in callers. And this one caller calls in, and he's a little emotional when he's calling. And this is what he said to me. He says, "I'm 63 years old, and I've been waiting all my life to hear what you just said." Other words, that thing impacted me, man. It broke my heart. Like, I don't know what I said, right? It was a whole segment and a half, right? But more importantly was that whatever it was I said, it took 63 years for you to hear it. And so again, that's just another way where sometimes we get stuck, man. We're in our 50s and 60s and we haven't heard what we needed to hear in order to be whole, or we're stuck on some stuff that keeps us from being everything that we're intended to be. As I say, you know, we're created masterpieces, but oftentimes we live our lives as carbon copies.
True that. I'll go back to something your pastor said a while ago that moved me. It seems like your pastor, the pastor that allowed you to bring those poets into that church, he read the doctrine about come as you are, you know, allowed to come into that space and evolve into the people that God wanted them to become. And that's a little new down here, because I mean, in the South, we kind of get beat over the head with punishment, and if you don't do this, if you don't walk like this, you don't do like this, God gonna hit you over the head. I'm exaggerating, but that's really the way I felt. It was like there was never an embracive God to embrace us where we are. It's always like this damnation and punishment and doom. And I like where you said you and the pastor taking them to encouraging them to be who they are divinely supposed to be.
That's right. And you're right that we will get beat over the head, and it doesn't allow us to grow, you know. Absolutely correct.
Right. And I'm trying not to pass that on, but it's some things that, like, I have to teach my son because I want him to be able to come home, you know, keep your head. I'm wondering, am I conditioning him the same way I've been conditioned as a child to not really explore the world in the way it's supposed to be because of analyzing the way it is.
It's a very tenuous battle because we are treated differently, and so we have to respond differently. But I think, but the questions that you asked is a great question, and needs to be examined. Is that if I continue to put this in their spirit, when will we ever get over it?
Yeah.
You know? And so, yeah, we have a lot of work to do because we have to teach the oppressor the right way. But at the same time, we have to have our kids grow up and not have the anchors of history past holding them back.
Right.
And you do have to, you do need to have your hands shown because it doesn't take very much for them to pull their trigger when it's us.
Well, on a popular topic, I see you took a different take on the Will Smith thing that I did, but I want the audience to hear your take on what transpired and the way you put it. I was like, dang, that brother made me think about this a little differently. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, we kept hearing there's a whole lot to this, right? So we can probably be here 3 hours and we probably wouldn't even scratch the surface. There's a whole lot to this, and we know there's a whole lot that's traumatic, right? And people kept saying, well, you need to read this book. Well, I really don't need to read this book because I've been, not to say that I'm some expert, but you see it and you kind of know the signs. But people kept saying that Will Smith was protecting Jada. He was not protecting Jada. He was protecting his ego. Like he had been beaten down either through social media and beaten down at some level through the relationship with his wife, because Tupac in his household is the god of the household, right? I mean, there's enough film out there of Jada saying this that lets you know that Tupac, 20 years dead, is still the god of the Smith household. And so when that whole situation took place, Will went up there, and it looked like, for some, it may have looked like he was protecting her, but he was really protecting himself. And subsequently, what happened was he actually put a target on her back, because when you begin to look at the backlash that's taking place, there have been people who have since been very disrespectful to Jada in so many ways. And there have been other people who have just dug up old things in terms of what Jada, said. And so that slap, he actually put a target on her back. And there was a whole lot of other ways. People say, well, you don't know what a person's breaking point is, and you're absolutely right. But there was a way to handle that thing and be very gangster about it, man. And what I always teach these young boys, and what I teach men, is that you have to prepare for the win. And when I say the win, I'm talking about the WHEN, right? It's not an if situation, right? A lot of the things that we encounter, they ain't ifs, wins. Prepare for the win, right? And I tell people all the time, conflict is inevitable. You cannot avoid conflict, but combat is optional. And so he chose combat, right? And there was a way, for me, I know what I would have done in that situation if I felt my wife was disrespected, right? And I would have went up there and whispered in his ear and then walked back. And would have had everybody thinking, well, what did Reggie say in his ear? I would have whispered in his ear and walked back and sat down just like Will did, and then said, hey, hey, Chris, we good? We good, Chris? All right, pace, right? And now everybody's wondering, what did he say, right? And that would have been a greater form of protection than actually one black man slapping another black man in the public forum.
Oh, respect. I like your take on it. I like it. We better talk about marginalized voices and this image of your book here. When we're going from that to this, I mean, you described the picture, but it reminds me of the Nat Turner when he had the American flag tied as a noose around his neck. But what is your take on this image you have up here? It's beautiful.
First of all, let me tell you something. It was easier to write the book than it was to come up with the cover.
Right.
Cover was a struggle. But I knew that, you know, when you're creating a cover, the cover has to almost tell the story, right? And so, you know, some people might look and they see the American flag, so they might think the book is kind of berating America, but it's really about the whole American system. And it's not just America in itself, it's how we are conditioned to believe the things that we believe. But by having the mask or having the flag over his mouth, he's not allowed to talk. If you look at his face, you see discoloration, right? And I purpose like, yo, you got to have the color, you have to have the face discolored, right? Because what that to me says, it has a stressful look, because these young Black boys are walking around, man, with a whole lot of stress on them. And there's one eyebrow that's raised, right? Because a lot of times you see, you know, with that grimace, you'll see that eyebrow raised. So there's one eyebrow that's raised, it kind of like, it has the menace look. And then the other eyebrow is kind of lowered, which is kind of like the sad look. And on that particular eye, there's a tear, and the tear is blood stained, right? And then the other eye is a scar. And so all that talks about within his face, you see all the pain and the struggle that these young Black boys have to deal with. And I particularly, you know, I specifically had his hair locked, because a lot of times when you see young Black boys, when they have their hair locked, they're thought of as threats. So that was it. And then the image, which is in the back, which is kind of faded away, is actually a project out of Baltimore. And so, you know, a lot of people don't get that image in the back, but the image in the back is actually a project. Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah. And I just kind of had it faded out.
Okay.
And then chose the color red, you know, just because along the lines of blood and things of that nature. So it was, like I said, it took me about 14, actually the first thought that I had, or the first image that we came up with, was a Black boy shot, laying on the ground, shot, and the bullet, you could see the bullet holes, and out of the bullet holes was the flag was flowing out of the bullet holes. Somebody's like, nah, Reg, we went through a few iterations of this book, man. Like I said, it took me probably about 14, 15 months to come up with that project, to come up with that particular image.
Now, hey, when people come up to me, they want to tell me what they book. I love to hear their take on it. But they want to tell me about what my book was about to them. Like I didn't write it. I'm like, I know that's in there, but you said something in there that puzzled me. You said, this is not a book about solutions. You said that once in there somewhere, and this is outlining some problems that we need to work on, but this is not a book out of solutions, but I do hear some solutions in there.
You know, there are some solutions in there, right? There are some, but I didn't want people, see, a lot of times when you hear people say, you know, we know the problem. No, you don't know the problem, right? You don't. So we can't talk about solutions when you don't really know the problem. And that was kind of what the point was, is that a lot of these things that are challenging young boys, you really do not understand, right? And so, I put that up there because I didn't want people to pick up the book and think I was going to have 300 pages of solutions, right? And you're right, there are some solutions in there, but I didn't want that. I wanted people to understand that I am articulating the problem in a way that most have not heard it. And the one thing that I hear more than anything else is, wow, you gave us that particular situation in a way that we never understood it. Like, that's when I knew that I had it right. Because when I had my, when I sent it out to beta readers, I think I had like 14 beta readers. And out of the 14 beta readers, 11 of them came back and basically had the same comment. Wow, you made me look at this differently. So that's, that's why I wrote that. It wasn't solutions, it wasn't about solutions. It was really about articulating the problems in a very nuanced way. Let me give you this example. I do this example all the time, right? I wish I had it up, right? So there's these 7 words I use, and I say, a woman without her man is nothing, right? So look, I love how you looked at me. I love how you looked at me. A woman without her man is nothing, right? So quite naturally, all the women in the room, they catch that and they're like, what? What are you saying, right? And so then I say, okay, we're going to take the same 7 words. We're going to put them in the same space. But what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 commas. And so here we go. A woman without, comma, her man, a woman with, a woman without her, God, I don't forgot how it is. Wait a minute, let me get it right. A woman without her man is nothing, is the first sentence. The second sentence, we add a comma. A woman without her man is nothing. So you see that? So I put a woman without her, comma, a man, comma, is nothing, which now flips it the other way.
Right.
Right. So before it was a woman without her man is nothing, which made it seem like the woman was nothing. But the second one says, it makes it seem like a man without his woman is nothing.
Right.
The point of the exercise is easier to do when you can see it. The point of the exercise is that although a situation may look the same, the comma and the situation will change it.
Mm.
And if you're working with young boys, you have to find out what their comma is. You can't say, because I come from the same hood that you come from, or I come from the same conditions that you come from, that I understand your situation. No, you come from the same situation, but there may be a comma in his life that makes his situation differently. And I was teaching, I had a young brother who was a banker, and he comes from one of the neighborhoods in Washington, D.C., Anacostia, D.C. Anacostia, D.C. is rough. Mm-hmm. And so this kid, when he was growing up, he got in a lot of trouble, but he got his life on track, went to Morgan State University, graduated, became a banker, was making a lot of money. He's like, Mr. Williams, man, I really want to come back, and I want to talk to youth. And so I started working with him. And one of the things he would do was he would just kind of blurt out like, yo, I know where you're coming from, man, because I come from that, I come from the same situation. It's like, nah, you can't just do that. Like, you do want to tell your story. You do want them to know that you come from the same situation, but you can't tell it like that. And so one day we were at the University of Maryland, and there was some young men there, and they happened to come from the exact neighborhood that he came from, right? And he went on that whole rant about, yo, I'm from that hood. I know this. I know where you're coming from. And the dude up front, very, very respectfully, he said this: I don't give a F where you come from, because when you leave here, you're going back to your nice house, but I gotta go back to that hood. And it shocked him, right? It threw him off track. And I said, yo, you can't use where you come from as a VIP pass. You have to understand what their situation is, understand what their comma is, and then speak to that comma using your situation. So I always tell people, you got to understand the comma in the young boy's life.
Oh man, you should have gave Cam Newton that comma when he made that statement about women the other day. He needed a few commas. That's why I got Reggie for to get me counsel.
No. I would never say, but it's an exercise. It's more powerful when you see it rather than me just telling you. But I do it every time. I get women and they're like, and then when I put those commas in there and they see how I flipped it, like, oh wow, okay, cool. But they agree with the second one. Yeah, the second one, yeah.
Yeah. So more about the book though. More about the book. I've been devalued, dismissed, disenfranchised, and demonized. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us what made you come up with that use of alliteration?
I think that's growing up in a Baptist church. But you know what was funny though? This was crazy. So I came up, I came up with the title, came up with the iteration, and the book hadn't come out yet. And I was in the gym working out, and Brian Allen was being interviewed, and he used devalued, dismissed, and disenfranchised, and then he had another D. I don't remember what the other D was. And I was like, hey, he stole my title. For me, it was confirmation that that was the right title. You know what I'm saying? But these are all the things that we are. We are devalued. We are dismissed. We are disenfranchised. We are, we are demonized. I tell this story all the time. Most of the times when I'm in meetings with women, right? Most of the time, a lot of meetings that I'm in, a lot of these women, they have PhDs. I do not have a PhD, right? So I have less education than they are, right? And so a lot of times I get pushbacks, right? And so this one particular time, there's this one therapist who is a doctor who says, after the meeting is over, she says, hey, and we work real good together. She's one of my favorite therapists. And she says, yo, Reg, I need to talk to you. So she says, can you come to my office? So I go to her office and she says, Reggie, when you're in meetings, man, you talk with an authoritative voice. I said, okay. And it makes people uncomfortable. And she was speaking specifically about the meeting we just came out of. So I said, okay, did I say anything that was wrong? She said, no. I said, was my tone off? She said, no. I said, was I disrespectful? She said, no. So what you're telling me is because they have an inability to value what I say, I should devalue myself? I said, nah, they got an issue. It's their problem. So what you need to do is you need to go back and have meetings with them and tell them to man up, so to speak.
Right.
But that's, we find ourselves in a lot of situations, man, where we are devalued. And look, let me say this. I say this all the time. The same dog that bit Black men also bit Black women. So we all struggle in different spaces, right? Black women are marginalized as well.
Right.
My market is Black men. And so when I'm talking about my market, it's kind of like I'm a doctor. If I'm a foot doctor, I'm not going to give you advice about your heart.
Right.
And so I'm not, so my market is Black men. Someone else can do Black women. But yeah, we are definitely those things. We are devalued, we are dismissed, we are disenfranchised, and we are most definitely demonized. And that's why it's so easy to kill us.
Right, right. And you said at the end of the book, you ended with they tried to bury us, but they didn't understand that we were seeds.
That's right.
So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of nuggets of solutions and wisdom in there. I like the way you kind of the way you communicated is like Malcolm X taking our argument to the world when he went before the UN and talked about the plight of the Negro there. I understand it now, but I had to ask you first. I was like, why did he say there's not a solution? I get it because you wanted the problem to be completely heard and identified.
Absolutely.
And I get that. That's Malcolm X's now.
Absolutely.
Taking our argument to the masses. Because some people don't understand. Like you're saying, you just in a space where you're trying to communicate and it gets taken out of context. You should have said it this way. It's like, it's almost always go to the Trayvon Martin situation where he was walking slow and Zimmerman say walking slow, he has to be up something. Then when he walking fast, he's got to be up something. What pace do we tell Black boys to move about? It's like, it's this world that we live in. It's like, no matter what we do, is it 2.7 miles per hour? Is it 3? What is it? How do we navigate this world and be able to express ourselves as enlightenedly as you do without it being perceived as offensive or threatening?
That's right. We're always, it's hard for us, and I'm going to say this and not, unapologetically, white boys can walk outside and walk down the block and they can think offensively, right? I can take this and I can do this with it, or I can take that and I can do this with it, and I can do this, I can do that. As Black boys, we walk outside and we have to be defensive. We have to fight against what's coming at us. And so we're fighting what's coming at us. Sometimes it's hard to stop and be offensive and say, oh, this right here, I can take this and do this, right? And we have to learn, or we have to teach them to find spaces where they can sit down and navigate their brilliance. Because a lot of times we just don't. Like you say, you know, it's 2.7 miles the pace to walk, or is it 2.9? Or, you know, should I be walking at all? But maybe I should be, you know, if I stand still, you know, it's like, it's so many different things. It's a police officer who tells you to put your hands up, but give me your driver's license. Oh, put your hands up, you know, drive, you know, what do you do?
Yeah, that's it. It's this world that only people in you like you and I can share our stories and speak a truth to that the rest of the world, and hopefully the way the rest of the world will receive it and embrace us where we are for who we are, as we try to do for other people in other spaces and other cultures.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But running in on the time, but I wanted to make sure that any closing thoughts on your books, your handle, how can we get your book? How can we stay connected with you and these brilliant things you're doing to inspire the next generation of leaders?
Thank you. You can get the book just by going to marginalizedvoice.com. Very simple. My handles, all my handles, TikTok, which I don't do a whole lot of work on, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter is Seeding, SEEDINGTO Bill. And I just went back to the concept growing up on a farm. You know, you have to seed something, you know, so it's Seeding to Bill. And if you want to purchase the book, it's a marginalizedvoice.com. Go in there, hit purchase to buy and get it. Right now I'm working on a anthology, which it's a struggle, right? Like to do this anthology, it's an anthology, hopefully of 12 mothers. The name of that book is called The Renaissance of Raising Black Boys. Story of 12 mothers who are going to kind of talk about their fears, their joys, their expectations, but more importantly, they're going to lay a blueprint for how the world is supposed to honor their young Black, not just their sons, but just Black boys, period, right? Because as much as I'm an advocate for fathers, and, you know, fathers have got to step up and be in their sons' lives. And we are in their lives more than media reports. But a boy can't, let me say this, let me get you in some trouble. A woman cannot raise a boy to be a man. She can do a wonderful job of making him a wonderful gentleman and a wonderful adult, but being a man is internal. It's not about what we do, it's about who we are and how we're being. And so the only way to understand that is you have to live that. And so you need another man to explain and express that to a young boy, right? Now, but in order for a young boy to be everything that he needs to be, he needs to have the voices of women and his mothers in his ears. I will never be who I'm supposed to be, or I'm not who I am without the benefits of my mama and without the benefits of my grandmama. My grandmama is like one of the most amazing people in my life, right? And I hear her voice. I was talking to my mother about her mother the other day, and I told her, although she's been dead 20 years, I don't miss her. And the reason why I don't miss her, because I live every day with her. Right? Hear her voice every day. Right? And so that's what I want the book to be. I want the book to be a voice of mothers saying to the world, this is how you want to treat our Black sons.
Oh man, that's incredible, Ash. I just have to thank you, and I let you know that I hear your mother's and grandmother's voice through your voice, and trying to nourish and foster the next generation of boys to have a space that we don't have to worry about how fast we walk in
That's right.
So thank you for your input and your time, for joining us here on The Way It Is. I'm running up on my time, so I will post this later and tag all your handles in it. But I just really appreciate you so much for giving me the inspiration when I was becoming an author. And now I can have an author-to-author conversation with my brother, Reginald Williams.
Absolutely. Hey, we need to check in with each other at least once a month, man. No less than once a month.
Will do. Will do.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, check his book out. That's My Time. That's the Way It Is. A Marginalized Voice by Reginald Williams. Thank you so much, and tune in the next time. Thank you, brother, for joining us. Hope you all have a blessed day.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Man, thank you for that.